Um, okay, hello and welcome once again to an intelligent webinar. We are now coming into the second week of January 2021. Christmas is behind us. Gym memberships have been started, never to be attended, and Brexit is what Brexit was, and we are all looking forward to a much better 2021. We know 2020 was incredibly difficult personally and professionally for many people. So here at Intelligent, for this webinar, as we look forward into 2021, we wanted to talk about how can we give the most value and help people buy, grow and sell their businesses in the year to come. I'm delighted to be joined today by two experts much more knowledgeable and experienced in this space than I am. Phil Fraser from my adopted hometown of Leeds. Welcome, Phil. And Alex Bodini joining us from my beloved hometown of London. So Alex, welcome. And thanks very much for taking the time to share your experience and expertise today. So what are we going to be covering off today? It's going to be much more about Alex and Phil rather than me for once. So we are going to be looking at introductions. Alex and Phil both got fascinating backgrounds and highly relevant to what we're talking about. So look forward to hearing their intros. We'll look at some of the things we've covered off before in buying your dream business, but in this occasion we'll be getting Alex and Phil will be talking about their own experiences in the space of buying, growing and selling your business. When we talk about growing as well, it's not just I'm planning an exit. Obviously, when people have acquired a business, then the first thing they want to do is make a success of it and grow it. So we'll be growing your business. We'll be linking both buying and selling your business. And we'll have a quick Q&A at the end. But as we normally do with this, as the questions are coming through, I'll get them off to Alex and Phil as we go through the webinar. So introductions. So in the blue corner, Alex Bodini. Alex hails from London. He's CEO of Spin Brands. He's a serial e-com entrepreneur, investor, acquirer, and developer, seller of businesses, and fantastic. Works with some excellent brands. So he's got some superb insights into the e-com space and to business generally, certainly from an investor's point of view as well. Phil Fraser from Leeds. Phil has got a superb job description. Describes himself as a business sounding board. Phil, I think that's part non-exec, part mentor, part business coach. But I think for reading a single line on LinkedIn and getting a good understanding of what someone does, absolutely love that description, Phil. Also love the fact that you took an idea from a kitchen startup to a multi-million-pound exit. I mean, that is the dream story that so many budding entrepreneurs and business owners want to hear. So absolutely delighted to have you both join us today. After that, shambolic at trying to encapsulate what you've done. Alex, if I can go to you first, and if you could talk to us through a little bit about Spin Brands and your journey and how you've got to where you are today.
Yeah, of course. So Spin Brands is kind of my main kind of day job, my kind of, I guess, my foundation that everything else is built off of. We are a pure play social media agency. And basically what that means is we do three things on behalf of businesses and do them very well. Number one, we build brands through organic social media marketing, i.e. building great Instagram profiles, Twitter profiles, Facebook profiles, so that people can kind of learn about a brand and really engage with a brand and what they are. Sort of paid performance marketing, which is really about driving revenue. So if the organic social media is about building the brand for the long term, then the paid social media marketing is about kind of driving revenue, driving performance, and ultimately keeping the numbers ticking over and keeping the finance directors happy. And then we do kind of ambassadors and kind of the influencer marketing, which is quite kind of a fast growing marketing channel. So that's the main business. We are a really good, happy, healthy business. We're growing all the time since we launched 5 years ago, and we love it. And I think the other part of my kind of story is that whilst we love doing all those sort of things for the brands that we work with, and we work with some amazing brands, there was always that entrepreneurial side of me that wanted to leverage my skills and our wider team's skills and approach to ultimately have more skin in the game, or ultimately win when we use our tactics in the right way. And that's where I was led into the world of kind of buying and selling and building businesses, really. I've been through kind of all three sides of, I guess, the agenda today. So in terms of, we have bought businesses, we've grown businesses, and ultimately we're in the process of selling a couple of the businesses now. And yeah, so I suppose that's kind of why we have this kind of wider portfolio, and it's all leverage off the kind of the core skill set that we have, which is Spin Brands.
Fantastic. I love the healthy business, and so I'm looking at your weights in the background and in your home office. I think, Alex, what's really interesting that you refer to there, and we see it as we come and we value businesses, some of the dynamics and what people are putting value on is very, very much changing. So, and I know you and I have had some discussions where you come in and you say, okay, well, okay, this is what people normally look for. You know, what's your gross profit? What's your net profit? What's the adjustments? All those traditionals. What multiple are we going to look at? And actually now, and obviously there's the big unicorn examples where back in the day with Twitter and Amazon, they weren't making money, but they were valued at billions. But we've seen that come through now on a much smaller level, where a brand can demonstrate fantastic reach across all the socials, and its revenues might not yet have caught up with that opportunity, but buyers coming in are absolutely, they're still interested. You know, they see audience reach being a very different, very different, but having a very different approach to what value looks like. So I think that's going to be fascinating for a lot of people watching us today. Bill, if you could do the same, let's go from how we got from the kitchen table to the multi-million exit.
Yeah. Okay. So my business started as an accident. I think nowadays people would call it a pivot.
Yeah.
It's a very trendy way to say
emerging strategy, Phil. Emerging strategy.
Emerging strategy. Yeah, absolutely. So I worked at William Hill, and I launched their first ever online casino back in 2000. One of the things we looked at when I was at William Hill was the online bingo market. William Hill, I did a presentation to the board. William Hill at the time decided not to go with it. I left at the end of that year and did a bit of consultancy work, but at the same time thought online bingo might be a sector that's growing. So in very simple terms, dusted off this presentation I'd done to William Hill, reshuffled it a little bit, and took it out to the market in classic sort of Dragon's Den looking for angel investment scenario. That failed completely, didn't get any backing whatsoever. Yeah. However, I'd built a very basic website listing all the bingo sites in the US market at the time. It was only in the US. And what I'd done is I used a very simple research pop-up on there to find some demographics for this presentation I was doing. So I could talk intelligently about the size of the market, how much people were spending, where they're playing, all that sort of thing. What happened was some of the sites that were listed on that website contacted me and said, can we advertise on your website? Yeah, sure. Send me some money. I'll run some ads for you. And that became the business. And that grew from, as I say, a complete accident. It wasn't set up as a business. We never, ever had a business plan. And it just grew from there. It took us 5 years to get from working from home to the very big grown-up step of taking on staff in an office. And 18 years later, we exited to a PLC.
Fantastic.
That's it was a bit more complicated.
that doesn't encapsulate any of the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that, the peaks and troughs and the highs and the lows.
Absolutely.
No, brilliant. Phil, thanks ever so much for that. I think across both of those, that sets us up very well for start looking at the process, and as we go through, understand, what experiences you had in that process that would be useful for people watching today. So when we've done that, and we've done whole webinars on this, when we look at, you're buying your business. So how do you find it? Questions to ask, negotiating the offer. Similar to what you've just said there, those are 5 bullets that completely fail to grab, what's involved at all these different stages. So, I'll briefly go over this. Find the business. We spoke about either you're using a broker, whether you're using word of mouth, whether you're using networking, whether you go to one of the aggregator sites in the UK, you come to Intelligent, our own website. People can go in there, they can find the business. They get in touch, they utilize us to help get in touch, ask questions, how would you grow the business, that type of thing. We know there's the negotiation and the offer process. You do your due diligence and getting your paperwork, and the importance of having funding in place. That's what it looks like on a slide. If I go to you first, Alex, when you think about getting into a business, finding a business, what's been your experience? How have you gone about it?
So I think really it was quite surprising to me in the first instance, just kind of how, I guess, common it was to buy businesses. And it wasn't really something I was that aware of. And I suppose I grew up in a wider generation of people who was all about startups. It became the thing that everybody wanted to be. It was like, rather than being a footballer, it was, I want to be kind of, I don't know, Mark Zuckerberg and start something in my university dorm room type thing. So, and there is a time and a place for that, but as we know, in terms of looking at failure rates and also just suitability for certain things, it's often just a bad idea for a lot of people, and it's sort of too tempting, and it's sort of made out to be too easy. So the notion of buying a business was something I kind of came across, and I was like, well, it kind of makes complete sense. And having done both starting things from scratch and having bought things, just the amount of I guess kind of groundwork that is laid by a business that's ultimately already established is amazing. And not only that, you're able to see some sort of initial traction and numbers and data around how that business is doing. And I think one of my, I guess, most pleasant revelations was realizing how open people are about kind of their numbers and their data. And typically, because of the space that we're in, we know what we're looking for from an e-commerce perspective. We know broadly what's a really good health indicator and what's something to be a bit concerned about. So by being able to kind of like look through platforms such as yourselves, and be able to filter down to certain areas that we're interested in, then actually we were able to find a lovely little short list of things, and then we immediately know what we're looking for as we start the Q&A and start looking through some of their figures and things like that. Does that answer the question a bit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've got your shortlist down, and just for, I know it's going to be different for everybody who's looking to acquire a business, Alex, but from your side, what typically, without giving away any magic sauce, what typically are the sort of things you're looking for? And the reason I ask that question is, if somebody's watching this, they're owning the business, they're finding it hard yards. I think it's good to know that actually they are creating value, that they are putting something together that I think people might not realize that all that blood, sweat and tears does have value, but where should they be focusing? For someone like you, what would you be looking for from a business?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, because I think there is a lot of like super undervalued kind of assets whereby really smart product people, they might be kind of inventors or just kind of creatives, kind of, and they've got a great idea for a business, and maybe they've spent good money, good effort kind of bringing that to life, but actually just finding, again, it's a bit of a kind of a Silicon Valley cliche, but finding that product market fit is quite difficult for them.
Yeah.
They might have a great product, but they haven't found the right market. Whereas what we can do is often find something which is kind of trundling along, it's doing okay, but we look at it and go, wow, actually that looks like it's got huge potential. And as long as, if we use our skills and the wider kind of data tools and branding tools that we have available now to put that product and that brand in front of the right people in the right way, that we can really see some quite explosive growth. So, I mean, off the top of my head, the sweet spot we'd be looking at is largely something which is in the e-commerce space.
Yeah.
Largely, and which suits an online purchase. So kind of something that people are used to buying online. From a sort of price point and margins perspective, it has to be healthy enough. I mean, it's hard to sell low kind of average order value, low value items online to any kind of cost effective kind of level from our perspective. So it tends to be kind of a slightly, let's say kind of £100 to £200 kind of price point would be typically very good for us. And I think it has to be something unique. It has to be something which has actually been thought about. I think from our perspective, it's too easy now to make a business almost in a day, where you can decide a particular sector you want to go into. I mean, I'm sitting here with a chili bottle. I mean, these guys have done an amazing job in terms of branding, but ultimately they could go onto Alibaba, find a good kind of thermos flask, order some samples, build a website on Shopify, run some ads, and away you go. And it's fine, but that's not particularly appetizing because there's nothing unique there. So we always like to try and find a story, whether it's kind of a artisan craft or someone who just really has created something very unique, either from personal experience or through, I guess, epiphany and then hard work.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, and I think you make some important points there that people need to get their head around. Is that, you hear a lot of people talking about the side hustle, don't you? Certainly in the in the e-com space, but there is the difference here about building a business versus having a job. Albeit a lifestyle business, a job, it starts to overlap a little bit, but having something then that actually scales out. But I think the what came across there for me is that you're going in, you're looking at this with a very specific, this is what I need this business to do that I'm looking at. So I think the takeaway for anyone there, is you're coming in, if you want to get the best out of an intelligent or anyone else who's in our space, knowing what you're looking for, it sounds really daft and really, really simple, but what you're looking for and why, and it's going to make that much easier to find the right fit for you. Because the other point, and Phil, I'll come to you on this in a minute as well, is that different people, in our experience, you can be the right person at the wrong stage of a business. I think even back in the day, Google, the founders of Google, one of the first things they did when they started getting some traction was go and find some, sort of corporate behemoth who had loads of experience and plug him in. These young, cool kids, with their incomplete PhDs and massive brains, but they went and got someone who actually had a bit of clout in the space that they would need to operate to get Google to scale. And that doesn't, you don't, obviously that's a very, very different scale, but at a local level, you might be the entrepreneur who's got the idea and seen the gap in the market, and there is a market in the gap, and you've got all this creativity, but day to day, are you the right person to actually be running it? Or do you need someone who's got a bit more of attention to detail and isn't going squirrel and running off after the next thing that, catches their imagination? When we talk about selling businesses, we talk about people separating themselves from the day-to-day running. So they're not trying to sell a job. But no, Alex, excellent. Thank you very much. Really, really interesting. Phil, from your point of view, I mean, you've gone from, as you said, it's kind of emerging strategy, making the mistakes and then building it up. But I know now for a fact you're now looking into the space, and you're doing that through the lens of all your experience that you've gained today. What's your perspective when you go out and you're buying a business? How are you looking, and what are you looking for?
Well, I've actually got a couple of different perspectives on this. The first is, while we were building the business, we acquired a couple of small websites that we plugged in as well. But actually towards the end, when we were much, much bigger, we were actually, plan B, if we hadn't sold, was to acquire our biggest competitor, which happened to be on the market at the same time. And that whole buy and build thing wasn't something I was particularly aware of until sort of much further down the line. Yeah. And possibly we'd have taken a business a different route if we'd done that a bit earlier. So we looked at it from in effect, potentially buying market share and just growing the business sort of that way rather than that way. But since then, one of the things, and a lot of people who've built and run their own business come out the other end, and I've done the same and thought, well, actually, was that just an accident? Could I actually challenge myself and do it again somewhere else? So I've started looking at the possibility of buying another business, building it, rolling it, and etc. And actually went on a training course last year about the whole M&A market and particularly the buy and build model. Buy a few smaller companies, roll them all together, and you sell obviously at a bigger multiple, the bigger you get. So from my point of view, previously was looking at a business that fitted in to add to our existing business. What I'm looking at now is potentially a business that is an interesting opportunity. And there's that balance, and you'll know this better than I do, there's that balance between something that's still got some upside to build into, but isn't so big that the owner has basically got all the money out of it, and it's just gonna toddle along at the same pace or slower than when you acquired it in the first place. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, no. It again, it's about the different perspectives, and some of this comes up when we look at selling a business is that where's the, you know, where does the opportunity sit? You know, one of the questions buying your dream business that we're having there at different levels is, well, if the owner wasn't selling, what would they do next? You know, how would they grow the business? They're in the space, and that often goes hand in glove with, one is the question, what would you do next? And I'd do this, it'd be amazing, it'd be brilliant, we'll do all these great things. That's fantastic. My next question is, why aren't you doing it? You know, is to let's just test that that what you've just told us is actually fact. But no, I think that's very, very interesting about. So you've got your, you know, to summarize that, you've got your criteria that Alex was talking about, but dovetails with what you're saying, Phil, is that you've got criteria because you've got strategy that's going to put the two together, and we're certainly seeing that make or buy decision coming in, and certainly on when you come to selling a business, if you're and again, getting ahead of myself here, but within the selling space, if you're selling and the buyer, as we had an example where business was up for €500,000, eventually sold for €650,000 because the buyer had earmarked €1 million to develop internally this side of their business, and came out with something that had contacts, culture, could plug and play, you know, and they were €350,000 better off. So their biggest challenge was actually going to be the cultural fit of bringing the parts together, which again, Phil, is another challenge when you're buying those disparate companies and you're trying to merge them into something that's greater than some of its individual parts. So
that's an interesting point, that, because when we were looking at acquisitions throughout, I say particularly towards the end, the question we had was, okay, if we're going to buy a business for, say, £500,000, £1 million, it's the opportunity cost. What could we do with that £1 million if we didn't acquire?
Yeah.
And then, yes, there's the upside. There's, you know, existing clients and in our situation, an existing website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas conversely, we could say, well, actually, if we built something from scratch for £1 million, it would be perfect to be the way we want it. You haven't got the integration situation. So it's not only how much is it, it's the opportunity cost. And your example is exactly right. How does it compare? What would you do with that money if you weren't buying a company?
Yep.
Or if you don't invest it in the business, would it be better bringing somebody in, or bringing an add-on business in?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, sort of aligned with that is also, if you are an existing business owner and you're looking to acquire other businesses, what infrastructure do you have in place where, when you're looking at the profitability of the business you're acquiring, how many of those costs can be absorbed into yours? So Alex, certainly in your space, the ability to scale with your expertise and knowledge in terms of the marketing and everything else, all of those things must come into play when you look at a business. I know you and I discussed one recently when you looked at it and thought, yeah, okay, I can see it, but the price point wasn't right. And actually, we've probably got the skill set internally to do a lot of that ourselves. You know, and I find that bit very, very interesting when people are looking at how they build out and buy their businesses. So, yeah, and there's a number of factors there. Then, and I think what's different from what people would have seen before is both of you, the emphasis on having your criteria, strategy, and understanding how it's going to fit in with your longer term goals. And look, for a smaller business, a high street, you're buying at a coffee shop or a barber's or something like that. That could be, that could be relatively simplistic now, but the questions still have validity when you're thinking, well, I've got one barber or coffee shop now, but what happens when I've got 5 or 6 or 10 or et cetera, et cetera. So I think that frame of mind, that thinking is very, very useful. Very interesting. Thank you very much. So that kind of leads into getting into the whole area of growing your business, something that you've both done. I know we touched on it earlier on, Alex, with we've got here about knowing your customer, use of social media. We've spoken about this in the presentations that we've done. These are all very, very standard, but the internet, as we know, has just changed everything in that regard in the last sort of 15, 20 years. But from your side, Alex, if you're just looking at that, about in your space, the ability now, and very data-led, to know your customer, and then how you can use that in social media, and sort of the promotion and marketing will fit in there in one place as well. I'm also interested, Alex, on your side, because you said yourself right at the beginning about happy, healthy company. So what are the things you've done to invest in your team that would be useful for people to share? And I think Phil, when I come on to you shortly, is very much thinking about you went through that, went from the kitchen table to then having to make the big brave step of, well, now we're getting the building and people and everything else, and now my time and effort and energy isn't going to be going looking forward and up. I'm going to be looking down and into the business with all the cultural fit and all of that type of stuff that goes on as well. So for me, I'm personally really interested. If no one else watches this webinar, I'm going to love this next bit. So Alex, if I can go to you first on that.
Sure. So I guess the biggest sort of game changer about social media marketing, wider performance marketing, is probably two things. Firstly, it's that you get feedback in almost real time, which is something which you've just never been able to see before. Like, I mean, even in 2012, when I first got into digital marketing, the data available was minimal compared to what it is now. And everything was much more campaign based, and you probably got your learnings after 2 or 3 months. Whereas now we can find out what is resonating with a particular audience within a day. So we can see what creative, what messaging, what copy is kind of is relevant to what audience. And we know so much about that audience. Like the kind of the ways in which you can slice and dice the audiences is amazing. And not only that, but I mean, these platforms do a huge amount of that kind of work for you. You can just find a kind of a sweet spot of your audience and say, look, kind of, here's our customers. Don't say anything else more about them. Just say, here's our top 100 kind of high value customers. And platforms like Facebook will crunch that data, they'll learn everything about them, and then they'll build what's called a lookalike audience, purely based on data, based on how these people behave, based on kind of how many devices they have, where they live, what sports they follow, what drinks they drink, how often they travel, and it will find statistically the most similar people to those kind of core customers, and then kind of just builds out further and further from there. So it's amazing that you can test and learn, and almost weekly kind of have a key learning that can be internally passed around the business, or from Spin Brands to our clients within their businesses, which is always quite fascinating. And I think the second sort of amazing thing about this social media marketing and also the wider promotion of marketing is that it's gone from being, there's the old cliche, is like half my advertising dollars are working, I just don't know half, to being like, actually, like, it's real kind of cut and dried now. Like, yes, there's conversations about attribution and what had the final and most important touch, but realistically, we can know that we spent £5,000 advertising and we drove £45,000 in sales, and it's clear and it's scalable and it makes sense. And as long as the numbers are kind of working out, then it's quite amazing to know that, oh wow, like, often once we find a business that we're working with, or that we're kind of that we've managed to purchase, that has that core latent potential, it's quite exciting, because you're almost like, oh well, we've got a big accelerator here and a kind of a tank full of petrol. Let's see how fast we can go, type thing. And then to answer sort of the second part of things, in terms of like culturally, kind of how to build things, kind of, because it goes very quickly from you're working in the business, or you are the business, to right, I now need to take a step back and start working on the business, and that's hard to step away. And I'd say a couple of things I would learn from is that, number one, just frequent and honest communication is massive for us. So within our team, especially kind of in 2020, the idea of kind of a remote working team, trying to talk them through kind of what is happening was a proper challenge. So being open, being upfront about things was huge. I think having sort of standards and kind of processes documented, and having kind of the way kind of written down in whatever format that is, I think is really important. And this whole idea of, like with Spin Brands, for example, and this rolls through to some of the e-com businesses that we have now acquired, we need to know that everybody's going to make the cake in the same way, because we need to give them they need to know the right amount of each ingredient. They need to know the process, how you build, how you add, so that we can give that recipe to anyone, and it's going to turn out looking the same, tasting the same, just as bouncy, just as tasty, not too salty, whatever it might be. So we need to have that and ultimately police it. And I think policing it is the harder part almost than writing it down. But setting up the systems, the processes, using the technology to support that, I suppose, would be a big part of it.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And what I find particularly interesting in that point there about, the training and getting everyone uniform in the right way. This might be a generational thing. You've gone through a stage where you had, sort of, your baby boomers, then and your Gen X. So you've got your baby boomers at the top of a business, your Gen X in your middle management, and then your millennials were coming through at the bottom. Very different approaches and looking at things in different ways. And now we're at a point where, you know, shockingly, when you're watching football and find out this lad, hold on, he was born when, you know, and you start seeing that. So now you've got some of the sort of the millennials coming through into more senior positions with a different approach to things, and they understand the pace. They understand that if you deviate by a tiny degree at the beginning, and you said right at the beginning, well, if you're going in slightly in the wrong direction, you've got your full tank of petrol and you're accelerating away, everybody needs to be facing the same way, because, you know, they'll be left at the side of the road wondering what the hell happened. I think that speed of change is really reinforced that, you know, whilst there's an awful lot of the very sexy stuff that people are outside of certainly your industry might see, and, you know, the cliches, everyone's sitting around on beanbags and, you know, brainstorming and all that, but the reality is there is also a lot of process, and we spoke about previously, a lot of documentation. And not only is that important in growing your business, and we'll see it in both the buying and selling side, is when someone comes in and said, you've done this great thing that's got all this scale and everything else, but I need to be absolutely certain I can see, touch, feel and smell how I'm going to pick that up, because if it's all in your head, then when you've disappeared off down the road, all of a sudden what I've got in front of me isn't worth, you know, as much as it was when you were in it, which is why we're seeing more transitions in transactions and people realizing the best route to actually work that transition, get some, you know, if you're selling a business or you're buying a business, you're prepared to give or receive a certain amount of money for where it is now, establish some milestones, grow the business, transfer that knowledge and experience, etc., and then realize some extra revenues there. That's excellent. In terms of just in terms of investing in your team, Alex, what sorts of things have been had a lot of impact for you in, you know, keeping the team well gelled whilst working remotely, but help you build a great team in the first instance? What are people looking for? And you're in London, competitive market. You know, what are you doing to attract people, keep them, and grow them? You know, people don't leave companies; they leave managers, and all that old cliche. While we're throwing out cliches, so
absolutely.
What's worked for you?
It's a good question, and I think probably part of it starts with the whole approach that when we are hiring, and it kind of is interesting, the generational thing you mentioned, because ultimately we have a broad mindset of hire the attitude, train the skill, because and we know what we're looking for. We know, like, we're not over the top in terms of like our values, and you have to think and breathe like us. That's kind of all super important, but we do have a set of traits that we know we're looking for, and ultimately those are kind of positivity, curiosity, kind of responsibility for kind of work and things like that. So it's really important that we see those things in the first instance, that we know we've just got kind of I people, or kind of we people rather than me people. It's kind of quite cheesy, but kind of it tends to stick in my head a bit better. And then in terms of investing in them, ultimately it's about, everything's a balance where we're trying to give people, everyone's hungry for learning, and especially kind of some of the younger 20-somethings who are just released into the world from university or something else. They want to consume kind of as much learning and kind of climb up the career path as quickly as possible. And that's good, but we want to give them exposure. We want to give them a chance to kind of excel themselves, but at the same time, we can't overwhelm them, and we can't give them no support, and they need to have the learning. So getting that balance right, I think it's probably one of our competitive advantage versus some of our some other businesses, is that we do give people proper rounded experience. And we have this kind of promise that we say to any new team member who joins, is that we say, no matter when you leave and kind of for what reasons you leave, we never want you to regret working at Spin. And we know that whatever we do, whether it's through our training, through our socials, through our kind of work-life balance, through our flexibility, or ultimately through the experience that they've notched up along the way, that whether they go on to start their own business, acquire a business, go kind of client side and join a kind of FTSE 100 company, fair enough. But as long as we send you away kind of as a weapon, as someone who's kind of learned some skills, that's our main promise. And I think the kind of the bean bags and kind of barista in the office type thing, I think that lasts 5 minutes in terms of how interesting that is. And then most people, especially smart, ambitious people, it comes down to like, what am I getting from this? Because I guess the worst thing is not I think it's much worse to be bored than to be kind of then almost not good at your job, if that makes sense.
Yeah. People want to be challenged. They want to be interested in what they do. They don't want the highlight of their day going to the beanbag and after being to the barista. That's not how it works. It's very interesting, Alex, and this will sort of segue into my questions to you, Phil. But curiously, I've worked, in the UK. I've worked for startups, established businesses, and I've worked in Malaysia and Singapore for a number of years, and was commuting to Madrid for a period of time as well. When I came back from Asia and promised my wife I wouldn't travel anymore, I promptly got a job that saw me in Madrid every other week. But the commonality in all of those were, and it's very similar to what you were talking about there, Alex, is I'd say to everybody, again, where you come from, I'm looking for coachability, personal responsibility, the right attitude, all of those things. And my line to people always on the first day was that, we're not going to grow old and die together. I get that. The market's changing and everything else. But wherever you go after this, you will be worth more in the marketplace. You'll personally feel that you've got more skill sets than you had now. That's my commitment to you. And in that period of time, let's work hard and let's have fun. And you know what? We've done some great things in some rubbish buildings, and I've had a real hard time in some spectacular buildings. That sort of stuff becomes wallpaper very, very quickly. And I think as leaders or managers or business owners, understanding that, is super important to getting the best out of your team. So Phil, that brings us on to where you were, your kitchen table culture and your multi-million pound exit culture. How did you grow in between, and how did you meet the respective challenges? Because at the time frame you're talking about, some of these things that Alex was talking about, your time frame would have been slightly different. So you would have seen the impact of some of this, from before it happened to it happening to you, to hopefully you molding some of that and taking advantage of it, as you did with the online bingo space.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting points Alex has made, actually, and I totally get towards my journey sort of splits sort of like early days and the end. And at the end, when you've got a bigger team, I think you have the flexibility to recruit on attitude and all those types of things, and personality. Well, obviously, you always recruit on personality. I think in the early days, the startup was myself and my wife, so we did everything. So you start by recruiting on stuff that needs doing. So it's a bit more operational than sort of personality and culture based, and then it develops. But I think a number of the things we put in place very, very early on, and went through the whole time. So, and a lot of this was learned from good places I'd worked at and bad places I'd worked at. Yeah. So we always had, as soon as we had staff, we always had a monthly meeting where everybody was in the meeting. So everybody knew what was going on the basis that, a good idea for the business can come from anywhere. Yeah, the clever strategic people aren't the only ones who can come up with ideas. We never had a receptionist, but it could have come from the receptionist. And my view was, if everybody can see the whole picture, they can always contribute with an idea or a suggestion or something like that. Yeah. So we did that. We always, very, very early on, I was a big one for training, for personal training. So we actually had in people's appraisals, we asked them what training they would like. So we were constantly developing them. Now, often we come to them and go, we want you to go on this training course, or we want you to go on that training course. Some of it was team training, some of it was individual training, some of it was off-site, some of it was on-site. So we were constantly investing in people on that basis. We also, I went with a mindset very early on, and it's sort of similar to what you've both said. If somebody came to me and said, look, I'm resigning, I'm going somewhere else, I would always be really pleased about that, because it meant I've invested enough in this person that somebody else wants them and thinks they're really good at doing potentially that job. So everybody went with a congratulations, well done, off you go. And I was happy with that. And then we did, some of the smaller things make a difference. So we gave everybody had their birthday off. Yeah.
That's such an easy thing to do.
You get your birthday off. If it falls on the weekend, hard cheese. That was the deal, right? Now, something as simple as that probably buys you a load more personal investment than the barista and the bean bags. And we had bean bags for a while, and people didn't sit on them
because no one can get up. They flop into them and then they're stuck. Yeah.
And you don't look particularly professional in a meeting rolling around on a beanbag with a brilliant strategic idea. It just doesn't work. So all those little things, I think, contributed. And I think, and you know, the odd Friday lunch we buy everybody fish and chips or stuff like that. And, you know, and a couple of days, you know, when it's really hot, right, I'm going out to buy ice cream, 2 months an ice cream. And just the small things really contribute. But a lot of it comes from, you know, the fish rots from the head. You know, unless it's in you to want to invest in people out, unless it's in you to want to develop people, it ain't going to happen. You know, you can read it in books and think, oh, this is a good idea, and it just won't happen.
Yeah. If it feels like hard work to you, it will look like hard work to your team. And then the whole congruency thing starts to fall off. And 100%. No. Makes sense.
But yeah, it was all about investing. And one of the other things, and goes back again to what you were saying about being challenged and all that sort of thing. One of the early skills I learned, and I actually went on a training course to learn it, was delegation. Because delegation is great for you as the individual, because it's off your to-do list, which is brilliant. You can do other stuff. It's great for the person you're delegating it to, because they take responsibility for it. But you have to do it properly. It's not just, I can't do this job here, you do it.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to say, this is what needs doing, this is the level it needs doing to, this is the time it needs doing by, etc., etc. One of the examples I always used to give was, you know, we want to get from A to B, whatever A and B are. Yeah. I'd go this way, but if you want to go that way, I don't care. As long as you get to B, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And some people find it hard to do that, to go, no, you've got to do it this way. Yeah. It's like teaching kids to do maths. You know, you can teach them. My daughter is now a teacher, so she teaches maths a different way to the way we were taught. You know, Alex is much younger than me and you, so he probably got taught a different way. But if you get the answer right, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You know, I'm not going to say, Alex, you've got the right answer, but you've done it the wrong way. Yeah. You've got the answer. And that's the same with business. If I've said I want this delivery by this date, like this, bring it to me when it's finished. And if you've got any questions, come and ask me before you deliver. Totally.
And, you know, personal experience of that, people might get it wrong the first time. Okay. As long as they've thought about it and, you know, I did this, did that, you can see what to correct. Second time they'll check, third time they've done it, and you've got something off your to-do list forever, you know, and they're empowered, they're doing something extra, they're excited about what they do. And curiously, and I'm mindful of the timeframes as we go through this, but we're looking at what's on the screen there about investing in your team. You invest in your team like that, you know, there's that great quote about marketing's too important to be left to the marketing department. You know, they become evangelists for your business. You know, your people you can trust, they're out there promoting and marketing you. They're the best example. You know, whoever comes in and talks to your business, they're going to have a great experience because they're speaking to that person who's been trained, who's been given responsibility. They'll build your networks for you because they'll be passionate on LinkedIn and everything else. And people will look at that and go, well, you know, that's a business you want to do business with, you know, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And it all comes down to that very, very human element. And it also, I think when you look at, we go back to about the type of business you want to buy. If you're not that sort of person, then you need to think about the type of business you're buying, because if it is hard work, you know, putting that sort of positivity out there, wanting people to be successful, then you perhaps need to be doing something that involves sitting in a room on your own with headphones on and, you know, and not having multiple touch points with colleagues and the public. No, thanks. That's excellent insights. And just as we go through to businesses when you've sold, and Phil, so I'm going to start with you on this one, Phil. When you were getting the business ready to exit, you say you sell it to a PLC who are going to come in and they're going to be super friendly and charming right at the beginning, and then they're going to come in like unleash a savage pack of hyenas in the form of their lawyers or their due deal team or whatever, and step back and go, oh, sorry, they're off the leash now. What were your key things? If there's three things you would say to somebody, you know, who's looking to sell their business, what are the key ones, the key lessons you've learned and you would pass on?
Yeah, I think the first lesson, and I think you mentioned it in a webinar back in November, I think it was, and you said do the 2-week holiday test.
Yeah.
what happens to the business if you go on holiday for 2 weeks? That is, before you do anything, I think that's the first thing you need to do. The business has to run without you. If it doesn't, you ain't going to sell. You've got nothing to sell, unless you want to stay in the business, at which point somebody who's acquiring you might not want you. So so point number one is the business has to be able to run without you. Now, that doesn't mean you don't do anything in the business, but it means the bits you do somebody else can do.
Yeah.
So when you sell, so that's the first thing. I think the second thing, and we particularly found this, was get all your ducks in a row. So things like contracts, processes, systems, all that sort of thing. So our business was a website.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you run your business for yourself, and this is bad practice, so hopefully Alex's team probably do this because he's much better than me. But the web development team builds stuff and write it and rewrite it and change the code and whatever. Nobody knows what different bits of the code do and why they do it and how they do it and why it does it that way, because you don't need to report it internally. So for me as the boss, guys, can you make the website do this? And a week later, the website does that. Now, nobody's making notes about that. Nobody's put it in the code unless they're doing it properly. So those sort of things, those internal systems that somebody else will want to see when they buy it, you've got to put those in place. And that gave me some difficulty. I'll tell you a strange story about that in a minute. So that's the second thing. And then things, the basic stuff like contracts with your clients, contracts with your suppliers, personal contracts with the team, all those sorts of things, because they're the first things the legal team will come and look at. That's what they'll do in the DD. We had the majority, about 50% of our business was affiliate revenue. Now, the online gaming affiliate market is a little bit there's a trust element to it. So there's various terms and conditions, and they're on other people's websites, and we get paid on the basis of sending players to customers. Now, yes, there is a contract somewhere in the ether somewhere, but the money just turns up and we trust them that they're sending the right number. You send that or you try and sell that as a concept to somebody who's not in the sector, they're going to completely lose their brains. Where's the written contract? Who's it signed by? When does it start? When does it end? What are the terms? Yes, it's somewhere, but it's not on paper. Fortunately, the people who bought us were from the sector, so they understood that. But just going back to the coding issue, the thing our purchasers were most interested in was our code, because it was a custom built CMS. So they wanted to look at it before we sold. Yeah. So I had to somehow find all our login passwords for our HTML and everything else like that, which, why would the MD want all that? So I had to secretly find that from our team. And then I had to come in on a Sunday morning and log in with them while they looked at the code. So I had to turn up a Sunday morning and very early on a Monday morning to be logged in with them while they looked at all our code, and nearly got caught by one of our web developers as I left the building at 7:30 in the morning, claiming to have forgotten my gym kit and going to the gym now. Why are you in the office at 7:30 in the morning, Phil?
Why is Phil hacking into his own business?
So absolutely. So it's all part of getting all those ducks in a row in preparation for sale, many of which you won't use as internal. So again, our internal reporting wasn't to the standards that were required by the purchaser, because we didn't need them, because we didn't report like that. So we had to go backwards and rebuild reporting systems.
Yeah, mate. So much of that, the getting the ducks lined up and everything. I've got in my notes here from previous stuff we've done is, due diligence loves clarity. Everybody comes to us, they want the best possible price in the shortest possible time in most cases. So I'll always say, well, make it easy then. Make it easy. Anything you've got, anything you're claiming, anything you want to extract value from, make it easy for someone to come in and understand. And relationships don't translate into the P&L and your balance sheet and your net profits. You've got to be able to evidence sells. In some of our businesses, people talk about how much cash they take. Okay, well, you can put another zero on that for all it matters. If you can't evidence it, it doesn't matter. It didn't happen. Alex, from your side with the, you know, you're looking at a sale now, I know as well. What's been your experience there? About, you know, and you both got great insights because you've both been buyers. So from a selling point of view, anything you'd add to what Phil said there?
Not especially, but I think the so the 2-week holiday test makes complete sense. I really kind of love that, and I think yeah. So it's just trying to find out maybe. I always like the idea that kind of selling is an outcome, not a strategy type of thing, and it's the whole idea that kind of there's lots of things you can do kind of to make yourself more attractive. So that ultimately selling is a really powerful outcome for yourselves. And I suppose from our perspective, we're always looking at a couple of the core things that really would make a difference to an end valuation, even if we're not planning on selling at this moment. For example, what makes us kind of unique? How can we use tech to either enable or enhance our kind of offering? What can we firm up now that kind of does become evident? So I suppose even though, like, let's say we're selling one business now, but with another business, we might be sort of already laying in the foundations, even 2-3 years in advance of anything like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. You know, I used to work with, when I worked in Malaysia, the business was owned by a Japanese company. So one of my directors working for me, Japanese guy, Akira, and he translated it, but he always used to say, you know, he would think about decisions that future Akira would be really pleased with, you know. So what, 3 months from now, 3 years from now, what will I look back and go, God, I was good, you know, and it's a really good way of thinking. It's a bit Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind and all that sort of thing, but it absolutely makes sense. And I think that's a really good way of, wherever you are in the process, you know, that comes into growing your business as well. You know, just what's going to look good in the future, what appeals, and also prioritizing what you do. You know, whatever I'm doing now, when I'm finished, has it added value to anyone outside the business, or have I moved deck chairs on the Titanic? You know, what's the point? You know, and I think that's a really good way of keeping yourself focused on the business. Yeah, the 2-week thing, that was John Crayford, our business sales manager. He will, that's one of his, and he will say that to absolutely everybody selling the business. You know, if you think about it, do that test, because he would always see the deals falling off at the end because something's come to light. So, you know, have the paperwork, prep your business, have it all lined up, and get all your ducks in a row. Makes absolute sense. While we've been doing this, there's a few questions coming through, and it's really, really interesting, sort of the different type of questions because of the breadth of the experience that you guys are sharing. So we just come on to the Q&A a little bit here. What a couple of things each that surprised you and frustrated you about the process of buying and selling business. Then we said at the beginning, Alex, you said about you're surprised that people, you know, didn't always consider that route. And from our side, we're always surprised how many people don't know you can sell a business and just literally shut up shop. But, you know, maybe one each from each of you is something that's surprised and or frustrated you in your career.
I think from
Phil, go to you first there, Phil. Sorry.
From a sales process, the frustration was partly lawyers and partly the buyer, because we had a couple of, the issue they had was they were a non-UK PLC.
Right, okay.
UK PLC, but non-UK company. They had American-trained lawyers.
Right.
So the American-trained lawyers were talking to our English lawyers using different terminology and all that sort of thing. So that was highly frustrating. But also, they spent an inordinately long amount of time on the heads of terms, which should have been in the conversations we had in the actual final contract. And what happened was the MD wanted his 10 penneth, the FD wanted his 10 penneth, and the sales director wanted his 10 penneth. And the changes would sort of go around in circles. And, you know, I hate to think how much our lawyers, or we wasted on money with our lawyers with that. Yep.
That makes sense. And yeah, it's a tricky one. We've heard that from, you know, as we've said when we talk about solicitors, you know, a cheap solicitor gets really expensive when you come to sell the business and find out they didn't shore up the contracts properly in the first place. But, you know, legal fees and everything else, it just feels like it's just going down a black hole a lot of the time. I can understand that entirely. Alex, from you, something that excited you or surprised or frustrated?
I think as kind of an entrepreneurial type guy, I've often got what could be called like shiny object syndrome, whereby everything catches my eye and I think, oh, that looks amazing.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing and almost a kind of a warning as well. It's like there's so many good opportunities out there, but you have to say no to the good ones so that when the great one comes along, you're ready for that type of thing. Because honestly, if I sat and looked for intelligence today, I would probably find 15 to 20 businesses I'd be really excited to know more about. And you have to be like, fine, it's fine to inquire, but if you do take it further, make sure that you're like, it's not just a good opportunity, it's actually a great opportunity, because there's enough out there and you've got to wait for the right one for you.
And which comes back to your point earlier on about having both of you made about having understanding what's my shortlist and what's my strategy that I want to, where this fits in the bigger scheme. It's a really good and simple question that's come through here. And Peter, thanks for this. And Phil, go with you first. What excites you about business? What's the fire in the belly? You know, you've had a successful exit. What gets you up in the morning thinking, I want more of this?
Challenge.
Yeah.
It's the challenge of, right, that's what I'm trying to do. How do I get there? How do I reach it? How do I put things in place to make it happen? And the actual, that was what we set ourselves the target. That's what we did. Brilliant.
Love it. And for you, Alex?
Just possibility. I love being able to look at something and knowing the possibility and where something could go and the little journey it could take you on.
Yeah, I think that's that excitement about where we could go, and or which in itself then creates the challenge, and links up with getting people behind you. And I'm as people that work with me will tell you, I'm not a detailed person, but I love to stand at the front of the room and say, guys, this is where we're going, and someone, Vicky used to work with me for many years. She goes, you're great at driving the bus, but you do need a team of mechanics, because you'll still be enthusiastically going on as the wheels came off, and you do have to get that team around you and recognize, I think, your strengths and weaknesses, and build that team in to realize the opportunities and the challenges. I think that absolutely makes sense. Just as we bring this to a conclusion, I'd be really interested in two things. One, your thoughts as we go into the rest of 2021, and once I've had your thoughts, if you could also give yourself a little plug where people can find you, where they can get in touch with you. So, Phil, if I go to you first on that, thoughts as you come into 2021, and how do people get in touch with the business soundboard?
I think thoughts for 2021. In a way, I would say the same for any year, which is make sure you've got a target set. Doesn't have to be financial, but what is it we're trying to do, and then work to that. So it might be, in this scenario, it might be by December 31st, I want to sell a business. So actually, you then start putting things in place to sell a business, or I might want to acquire another business. So we need to put, we need to maybe, get a war chest put together, whatever it might be. So I think whatever you do is set a target, set a plan. The way last year went, it might just be let's still be in business by December 31st. That might be your target. In terms of getting hold of me, you can normally find me on LinkedIn, so it's Phil Fraser, or if you search me on the internet, it's philfraser.co.uk. Don't go to philfraser.com, because that's a medieval reenactment costume company. So philfraser.co.uk.
Don't fight it, Phil. Don't fight it. We know you're out there.
That might be my next acquisition. I might got it. I'll buy that.
What are you going to do with the business? I'm going to close it down, and I'm going to stop having people ask me for wimples.
Correct.
No, fair play. I'm surprised I knew what a wimple was. Alex, for you, looking ahead, and how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that would excite me, and this probably maybe speaking to kind of sort of a slightly younger generation, maybe, is that they say that there's about to be the biggest sort of biggest shift in wealth between generations that's ever happened, because there is hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of sort of great businesses owned by, let's call them baby boomers, who might be coming to the end of their business journey, their business life, whatever it might be. They may not be looking to kind of sell their asset at the very, very top price. They may just be very happy for it to be passed down to somebody who's going to pick it up, maybe modernize it, maybe take it to the next level. And I feel like that's a huge opportunity for smart people to kind of get their hands on something which has got history, got legacy, got ways of working that they can then add their own touch to. So I'd be excited by that kind of gradual wealth transfer from kind of between generations.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fascinating, and I think if you look at lessons to be learned, and Phil, if you, I mean, my background's publishing predominantly, so I was heavily involved with a lot of the publishing giants who were moving from digital to online, and there were some of them that did it spectacularly well. They looked ahead with where it was going, and they took tough decisions now that financially they could have dragged them on for a little bit further, but actually no, they thought, let's think about what the brand looks like in the future and how do we own that transition rather than letting it happen to us. And then you saw others that got it so horrifically wrong, you know, brands that literally just disappeared overnight. And I think there's lessons to be learned there, Alex, from that, from the past. And I think that's a really, really interesting and an exciting point, I think. And, you know, and for me, that's the sort of stuff that gets us all up in the morning thinking, right, well, how do we go out and look at the world? And with so much negativity around for the last year, I think that's a great point to finish up on. Alex, how do people get hold of you?
Similar, the best place is probably LinkedIn, just as my name, kind of spelled Alex Bodini. And then always happy to chat about business. So alex@spinbrands.co.uk would be the best email to drop me a line and I'll happily have a chat.
Absolutely brilliant. Guys, thank you so much. Personally, professionally, I found that absolutely fascinating. Thanks so much for your time. I know you're in great demand, so carving time out for us and webinar audience is very, very much appreciated. And I look forward to working with both of you in the future. And anyone watching, as always, you can get involved with us at Intelligent 0800 612 7718. Email us at sell@intelligent, or if you want to find a business want advice on buy, selling, and growing a business, go to intelligent.co.uk and go to the Knowledge Hub, where you will find this webinar, previous webinars, and articles from guest speakers, etc. Something I will be roping both Alex and Phil into. Thanks very much, guys, and I wish everyone here a profitable and successful year. Take care now.